Good evening and welcome to my presentation on the music of Northern Ireland, Alternative Ulster, 50 years of music in Northern Ireland. Just starting with a quote here from Stephen Travers from the Miami Show Band, saying that every musician that ever stood on a stage north of the border during those decades, every one of them was a hero. So I'm going to run through a few different bands, a few different venues, and give you just a little bit of a taste of the history of some of the music of Northern Ireland. Starting first with Stiff Little Fingers and their album Inflammable Material, their song Alternative Ulster. I suppose such an iconic song and really speaks for what was going on at the time, that they wanted a different Ulster. They didn't want to live like this. They didn't want to be part of the Troubles. And it says there, Jim Riley, their drummer, said, "If I hadn't played music, I'd have been caught up with them. I'd just been another prisoner." So really kind of saying how important a role music played in his life, from keeping him away from the Troubles and giving him something else to focus on. And for their lyrics essentially saying this: don't be a kid caught up in this, don't perpetuate it, and find some way to stop this happening, based on the song Suspect Device. So really talking about what was going on at the time and very much expressing that for its people. So Alternative Ulster, 50 years of music in Northern Ireland, and I'm going to run through several different aspects of it just to give you a flavour of it. So this is a very brief overview of kind of all the different bands and musicians and artists, or some of them that have come out of Northern Ireland, some better known than others. Snow Patrol, Van Morrison, The Touts, kind of popular punk band from Derry, The Four of Us, David Holmes, DJ and producer, The Undertones, Stiff Little Fingers, The Divine Comedy, Therapy. Unbelievable rich depth of music talent that's come out of such a small place, Northern Ireland, just a population with a unique history, population of just 1.5 million. So just a quote there from Eamon McCann. He set up Radio Free Derry back in the late 60s, was very much part of the kind of civil rights movement, which reflected what was going on in America at the time in the civil rights movement. And he says part of it was the crack, as well as wanting to riot. So these were young people with a lot of energy, and they needed something to focus it on. So that civil rights movement became pivotal for them, and music was a big part of that. So just some of the different quotes to give you an idea of kind of what life was like in Northern Ireland. For some people, Terry Hooley saying, "We're going, you can shoot me, but don't shoot the band," talking about putting on a gig. Barry Devlin from the Horselip saying, "We were scared shitless most of the time." So touring and gigging in Northern Ireland might have been a bit nerve-wracking for some people. The 70s were horrific. You were afraid to go out. So in some areas, that would have been true in Northern Ireland. The DJ Michael Hendy Henderson there saying, "I used to carry both national anthems with me." So he knew he had to cater for different crowds. And obviously Bono had some strong words as well. So just starting at the beginning, maybe with back in 1968 with Van Morrison's pivotal album released, Astral Weeks, an album maybe overlooked initially, but over the years people have come to realise its importance, and Van Morrison's importance. As he says, "Belfast is my home. It is where I first heard the music that influenced and inspired me. It is where I first performed, and it is somewhere I have referred back to many times in my songwriting over the past 50 years. So it's obviously really important to him and to his music. And as he says himself, music is spiritual. The music business isn't. So the music business is a business. And I suppose he is that spiritual conduit that brings this beautiful music to us. There's a lovely walk you can do in East Belfast, touring around Hindford Street, Cypress Avenue, and you can see where Van Morrison himself grew up. So a really interesting walking trail. The link is there for you to have a look at it. And a wonderful album. If you haven't listened to it at a time, it's well worth a visit and spending some time with some beautiful lyrics in silence. Be easy to be born again. Eamon McCann says, "The release of Astral Weeks was as revolutionary an event of relevance to Northern Ireland as anything that happened at that time. Just in the way that all young revolutions do, it opened up minds and hearts to possibilities they had never dared dream of." To a much sadder occasion then, the Miami Show Band killings. Unfortunately, 31st of July 1975, 5 people were killed, 3 of them members of the Miami Show Band. It really shocked the nation, shocked the world, that these people could be targeted. They were just musicians, and seemed not involved in any of the violence in any way on either side. There was always this idea that you don't shoot the piano player. It was just that you just didn't go there, but they went there. And it was a dark time and really crossed a line. And I suppose it showed the seriousness of what was going on in Northern Ireland at the time. Excellent documentary on Netflix about that if you want to learn more about it. So looking at Derry then, and some wonderful music that came out of some wonderful places. Phil Coulter's The Town I Love So Well, a wonderful ballad that tells the story of Derry and the story of his life and getting married and coming back to Derry and seeing the troubles and then hoping for peace. And really this has kind of come true for him now, and wasn't the case when the song was written, but you can see the picture of the Peace Bridge there in Derry and how times have thankfully how times have changed. But a wonderful song that never fails to stir the emotions. So another band from Derry, the Undertones, and their song Teenage Kicks hit the charts and really put Derry on the map. Fergal Sharkey went on to have his own successful career. DJ John Peel, BBC DJ, was so taken with them, he played their song Teenage Kicks twice back to back, which DJs never do. And he had their lyrics, the teenage dream so hard to beat, he had that actually engraved on his gravestone. It meant so much to him. Wonderful band, wonderful riff. Another great song, Paul Brady, The Island. He really talks of the troubles and what was going on at the time. They're raising banners over by the markets, the Belfast markets. Whitewashing slogans on the shipyard walls, talking about the shipyards down in Belfast docks, and witch doctors praying for a mighty showdown. The witch doctor being Dr. Ian Paisley. No way our holy flag is going to fall. But really a love song. And we'll go marching down the road to freedom. And a song about freedom. So a wonderful tune that maybe very much captures the emotions of the time. Some other interesting kind of folklore and musical history. Led Zeppelin played in 1971 in the Ulster Hall, and it was the first time that Stairway to Heaven was played live anywhere in the world. So a really kind of pivotal moment in music history. Zeppelin's music served to create a unified atmosphere among the fans, and that night music drowned out the sound of gunfire and rioting only a few streets away. Onto another great character of Northern Ireland, Terry Hooley. Wonderful film out called Good Vibrations. Tells the story of his life and his music shop, Good Vibrations, where he sold these predominantly kind of punk records. But he set up his own record label and started producing records, and he did so for the Undertones and the band and the song Teenage Kicks. So that was thanks to Terry Hooley. As he says himself, we had all sorts of people in the shop. We had IRA men partying in the shop, we had loyalists, we had weird people, anarchists from Italy and Germany, all sorts of nutters. He said it really did bring people together for the first time in a decade. It didn't matter whether you were Protestant, Catholic, no matter what you were, so long as you were a punk, said Terry Hurley. New York has the bands, London has the clothes, but Belfast has the reason. Really interesting character, still going strong. He's having a Hooley night on New Year's Eve up in Belfast in the OES Centre. So a great character and a great movie to watch. Do check it out. So lots of bands came to Northern Ireland. The Clash were no different. Their gig was actually cancelled because they were afraid of a bombing. So they had to cancel it. But what Joe Strummer says of the time, he said, the punks informed us they were the only integrated people in the whole country. Punk gave everybody a chance to live for one glorious burning moment. These are just, you can go 20p it cost to see Stiff Little Fingers back in the day. Some of the bands there. And some of the venues that were really important in Northern Ireland. The Limelight being one of the main ones. The Limelight basically stayed open throughout the Troubles and carried on, and lots of different bands played here over the years. Anthrax, Arctic Monkeys, Jeff Buckley, The Libertines, Moby, Primal Scream, Slayer, Paul Weller, Oasis. And it's still a fantastic venue today, so if you get the chance to check it out. Another one is the Ulster Hall. I mentioned it with Led Zeppelin playing Stairway to Heaven. Obviously Rory Gallagher, one of the world's best guitarists, he used to play there on a regular basis as well. And Oasis played there. Some of the other bands that played there, the Waterboys, Prodigy, Snow Patrol, the Buzzcocks, and Led Zeppelin and Lemmy from Motorhead as well. So a really important venue. Another venue, probably lesser known, is the Old Flamingo, which was a dance hall out in Ballymena. And the Rolling Stones actually played there on 31st of July in 1964. Bob Dylan also played there as well. And you can see Mick Jagger and Bill Wyman there pictured with an RUC officer in the background. So a wonderful history in Northern Ireland. Lots of different kind of bands came and played in different venues throughout the country. Another venue in Belfast was the Harp Bar. You can see it there all barriered up. Bit of a rough spot, but a really probably the most important spot for punk in Northern Ireland. Bands like Rudy and the Outcasts played there. And apparently it was a bit of a strip joint, punk music, and apparently the Provisionals used to go for a drink there as well. So an iconic place in the kind of history of Northern Ireland, and it still exists today, but obviously they've done it up and it's a little bit trendier nowadays. The Pound was another music venue, important to Stiff Little Fingers, and the Trident, as the plaque says there, the birthplace of Ulster punk in 1977. And they sang about it. They said, "There's nothing for us in Belfast. The Pound's old, and that's a pity. Okay, so there's the Trident and Bangor, and then you walk back to the city." And that was really just talking about their music scene in Northern Ireland. Today you have the SSE Arena in Belfast. Big international acts visit here all the time. Take That, Adele, Oasis, U2, Bruce Springsteen, Def Leppard. So that wonderful musical history continues on today, with international acts being visiting all the time. Back to some of the other bands that came out of Northern Ireland. The Four of Us, their wonderful song Mary. Interesting here what Brendan from the Four of Us says. It says it's only when you get older that you start leaving Northern Ireland that you realise it wasn't normal. That sounds naive, but we grew up with the Troubles as a backdrop to our lives. It was just annoying. That was the weird thing about it. I remember the toy shop being blown up when I was 9. So he was just devastated that the toy shop was blown up, and maybe a bit of innocence there about what was going on. And he says music was an escape for us. I liked stuff that wasn't talking about anything like that. They didn't really want to know about the Troubles. They just wanted to get on with their lives. And that's really, I suppose, the majority of people in Northern Ireland. Some great documentaries about music in Northern Ireland. This Dancing on Narrow Ground, about the rave scene in Northern Ireland that really transcended barriers as well, sectarian barriers, where kids from all over Northern Ireland got together and went to raves. This is very much a 90s scene. Also a good documentary called Shell Shock Rock, kind of about the punk scene in Northern Ireland. Stiff Little Fingers, Outcasts, Rudy, Undertones, Parasites, Victim, lots of other bands like that. So a really interesting documentary as well. Paul Hartnett there saying from Orbital, there was a real unification within the whole dance music community. And that's really important, and just the importance of the role that music played. It was probably the one shining light through all the Troubles that really transcended barriers. Nothing else did that like music. Desmond Bell says there, rave brought temporary release from the pressures of living in a sick society. So well worth a look, those documentaries. Some of the other bands playing pivotal roles today. Controversial band like Kneecap, very kind of controversial lyrics, but a typical rap band, I suppose. They're meant to be controversial, and these guys are really unique in that they rap in the Gaelic Irish language, so that's probably a first. Worth checking out, some really good tunes, some good musicians, despite the controversy. Another great band I mentioned before is the Touts from Derry, wonderful band. And as it says there, it's not all about being political. We've songs about sex toys. We've a song about a fat friend that enjoys Mars bars. So their songs are about everything, even though some of them are possibly political, but excellent musicians and a wonderful band. More internationally renowned, Snow Patrol, wonderful, successful band, wonderful music. Interesting what Gary Lightbody says there. It's very hard to have anyone agree with anything in Northern Ireland. You don't hear yes an awful lot. And the word yes is a really important word in the new Northern Ireland. And that's interesting to remember. There is a new Northern Ireland, despite the troubled past. It's moving into a new era, and nowhere more so than the Oh Yeah Music Centre in Belfast, set up by Gary Lightbody and a guy called Stuart Bailey, who wrote a fascinating book called Trouble Songs, all about the last 50 years of music in Northern Ireland. And a lot of what I base this presentation on comes from that book. And this Oh Yeah Centre is now a centre for people to visit, play music. They organise youth groups, over 55s, and they have gigs. There's businesses set up in this Oh Yeah Centre. So it's become pivotal for music in Northern Ireland, and just pivotal for the people of Northern Ireland. And it's a really, really positive news story. Been running for about 12 years now. So a wonderful place and well worth a visit. They got some great memorabilia there. There's just some links there for an interview with Stuart Bailey himself. And I spoke to Paul Kane from the Oh Yeah Music Centre as well, and had a good chat with him about what was happening and all the positive things that are happening and coming out of music in Northern Ireland. There's a tour that you can do. So it's really, really well worth a visit. Just some of the articles I base some of this presentation on as well in the Irish Times. You can look them up, and these are my sources. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any queries, please contact me at johnboyblogs.com. Thank you.